wipes Lewis Brown.
And historic hat-trick for Fortek and Luke Browning here at Alton Park.
Round the outside is going to be a virtual dead heat between the two of them. Jordan Witt has his nose in front. Here comes Gelzinis, who I think was just ahead. Gelzinis takes the place on the championship by 37 thousandths of a second.
And Ben Green's going to take his first double win. The Century team are delighted.
Oh, they're sideways, completely sideways, gets it back together, holds it, what a save by Plato.
But John Cleland is attacking Soper, he's up on two wheels, he attacks again as they go to the right-hander and Lovely, and they both spin, they're both out. Soper and Cleland both out of the race.
Hello everybody and welcome to The Undercut. It's been a very busy weekend over at Thruxton. The championship rumbles on in the British Touring Cars. I'm Jake Sanson, he's Paul O'Neill. We're going to get into it. Paul, Thruxton, second visit for the 2021 season. At least it was dry, but it was proper frenetic stuff out there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was looking like it was actually going to rain. There was a bit of precipitation above us when we were at the circuit, and I was in the studio with Steve. And I had a big job on my hands because I was Tim Harvey for that weekend, so I had to commentate on the whole thing. So that was an interesting look on things. And usually, because I'm support races, I don't usually get to follow it as close as I did. So there was a lot of things that took my attention, actually. And yeah, it was good to be back there. It's somewhere that I always say I would never do one more lap than I needed to, because there's so many curbs you could cut and there's so much stress on the front left tyre. I just always think you're just waiting for something bad to happen. But Goodyear produce a fantastic tyre, and that's why we've seen such fantastic racing this weekend. So yeah, it was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because we did speak on the last undercut that we thought, or not you, I thought that maybe it would be role reversal, where I would see the Hyundai of Tom Ingram go in there full speed, looking at getting big points race 1 and 2, and Ash would do the reverse, but it wasn't the case. Ash kind of just took off where he left off at Knockhill, qualified well, and did the usual of doing very well in race 2. But it was an interesting weekend, wasn't it? It
certainly was. I mean, from all three of the major championship protagonists, it was very strange and diverse weekends from them all. Let's talk about race 1. Rowbottom, fantastic in qualifying. The Honda did as it was expected to do really in qualifying. It came up, it turned up and did a fantastic lap there with Dan Rowbottom at the wheel. Great performances as well from Cook and Hill, who really seem to have come out of the blocks fighting at Thruxton. They did it at the start of the year as well. But it's interesting how we weren't sure whether that kind of pace from these guys was just because of the wet. Now we have that assurance because we've gone to Thruxton for the second time. We now know that this pace is consistent, it's genuine. And certainly this weekend, Cook and Hill in particular, they stepped up to the plate. They became, for me, genuine title contenders now.
Yeah, definitely. I always said that, Hill was in there, but I actually didn't think that he'd be in there as much as he is now. Let's start with Hill, actually. I think that it was a problem for me, to be fair, Jake, because he had such a stellar weekend, that if Cookie didn't do what he did and Ash Sutton wasn't on the grid, Jake Hill would have, that weekend he had was proper championship big point scoring. That was someone you would look at definitely straight. You wouldn't even be talking about anyone else. But because of the Cook media storm with King Cook winning, 7 Thruxtons around there, then, I think he's now on par with Gordon Shedden. So that kind of, it takes the light away, and it really shouldn't do, because Hill, in my opinion, had just one of the best weekends I think he's ever had. He's still not won a race, and he is bang up there with other people who've won 3s and 4s. So it's unbelievable, mate. Yeah, but Hill was outstanding for me, and Cook was just absolutely, bionic. It was absolutely stunning what that guy done in the first race. And again, let's take Sutton out of the equation. Cook would have just been, it would have looked the superstar. Would have been 2 race wins again. So it must have been really hard for him to have that undercut put on him at the first corner Allard and lose the lead and see Sutton sail into the distance.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh Cook and Jake Hill, very, very strong in that first race. Good to see them 1 and 2 across the line. Paul Rivet, a tough mission for him in this weekend. Don't forget, this is only his second weekend in the seat, and he had the mother of all scares. I mean, you've been there as a racing driver before, Paul. That is one of the scariest moments that you can have as a racing driver. Losing it through church. He did exactly the right thing, though. He just got on that brake pedal, prayed, allowed the car to dissipate its energy on the grass, and he was so lucky not to be tagged.
So lucky not to be tagged. You only have to look at the apex speed of the BTC Honda to know that it's about 138 north of that speed at the apex. It's not even a brake anymore in those cars. It's a lift off the throttle. It could even be 142, 143. So you think about people coming through that apex and having Paul Rivette coming backwards at you. I mean, we were so fortunate that didn't end in a bad accident. So yeah, Paul will be pretty happy that didn't happen to him. But I think that again shows how good Jake Hill is, to be consistently in that top 4 all weekend, in qualifying, the races, practice. I just think it just shows how good Jake is, that somebody I think who is outstanding gets in that seat and just has a little bit of a struggle, because that's how hard British touring cars is. Paul Rivette is one of the top support race category drivers, in my opinion, that we've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, he is absolute top quality, and it's very difficult to just jump in and be star quality. Another thing I want to talk about a little bit, we touched on it briefly about Tom Ingram really struggling in the first 2 races to get up to scratch. 2 of the men that took advantage of that perhaps we may not have expected. I mean, one we probably did, Senna Proctor, very strong in that BTC Honda. Of course, that car was always going to be strong, and Senna got the good show out of it. But JP, Jason Plato, he was actually able to bring the Vauxhall forward and take it to Tom Ingram. That Vauxhall is finally looking competitive. The big question is that a one-off because it's Thruxton, or is that now all the development work finally catching up?
It's a one-off, that. I honestly think that's a one-off. So Plato, you're right, was amazing. He qualified near the top 10 or in it. And Dan Lloyd wasn't, I think Dan might have been in front of him actually. But they were around about the same kind of pace. But for him, I mean, I can't remember him battling with Ingram, like you say, because that just shows the disparity between the 2 cars. The Hyundai, 66 kilos laden with ballast in that first race, and that is the only reason that Ingram was able to, or Plato was able to have Ingram around, so to speak. I looked at a very, very interesting and honest and open interview with JP and Steve Ryder on ITV the other day, actually, and he was just saying it's the handling of the car is actually there. He said, but you cannot live with anyone in a straight line. And they put that down to the charge cool temperature of the air that gets to the intercooler or gets in and around. So the air that it takes in for the turbo needs to be cooled down, and then it fires it in to the turbocharger. And they can't get they reckon every degree of Celsius is 3 brake horsepower. So he reckons they're quite far off, which is such an open and honest thing to say. And I have heard this before. That people speak about aerodynamics, they speak about handling, but a lot of it is how all the engines are the same as in Swindon engines, but they cannot get the temperature down from the air going back into the engine to spool the turbo up. So that's a massive problem they're working on, because he said all he's ever doing wherever he is looking in his mirrors. He can't make a mistake and get away with it. But because everyone will pass him. And he says that the people who make a mistake in front of him, unless it's a big one, he can't get near them. And that would make sense, actually. So, he's got a brand new shell this year in the Astra. So I'm very doubtful we're going to see Plato win a race this year, which I think is very sad, because time is definitely running out for him to do something about that.
Well, it is. And, that's really interesting looking at that from a technical viewpoint, because so many fans of BTCC, so many fans of touring cars in general, see it as crash bang wallop racing. It's grandstand, it's enthusiasm, and it's pound for punch great racing. But at the same time, there is this real technical and engineering development, which I think sometimes gets wiped under the carpet a little bit. So that's a great tribute to the engineers and the mechanics that are in those teams that are really trying to maximize everything they possibly can out of the equipment to give the drivers a chance to get up there. So it's really interesting to know that you've got this race battle all the way through the season, but the engineers and the mechanics and all of the technical staff within the team, they're in a constant race in the garages, back in the factory.
Yeah, exactly. It's massive. Honestly, mate, it is huge what they're doing out there. And it seems to me like, you never look at a touring car and speak about aero And this year, it's ramped up, I think, because you're getting a lot of people, drivers, moaning about having aero wash when they're behind the cars in front of them. So that, to me, tells me that there's a lot of aero work underneath the cars and around the front and the sides that's disturbing the air at the rear of the car, at the rear of their own cars, and it's firing it into the other cars, and they're having a lot of understeer with no front axle grip. So the tyres are working even harder. I just hope that we don't go back to Super Tourer days where these wings start sprouting here and there, and it just shows you. I've heard of £15,000 an hour being spent at Myra for some teams on aero. So yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got to use your time well. So,
that's definitely 90s territory in terms of budgets, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And that's why the budgets are going through the roof. You take my old DC5 Honda, and that's a Team Dynamics car. There was no aero really made on that. It was basically a molded front and rear bumpers that were off the original car, and a stick-on wing at the back. So it's starting to creep in now. And I think, like you said, the engineers have a big window to play with. And I think that is why you're seeing these teams start to gap now, these better teams than anybody else. Like Plato said it himself, he went, the game's moved on, mate, and we're struggling. And I said that at the beginning of the year because they weren't in the last year with a consistent driver pairing. So that's, that says a lot. It says a lot, Jake.
It's interesting because the technical and engineering side is slowly starting to creep to GT territory rather than touring car territory. So that's fascinating to observe. One of the best battles from race one that I want to touch on a little bit, Butcher versus Rowbottom. That was grandstand stuff. Two young guys desperately trying to make an impression mid-season to showcase their skill and ability. They were absolutely on it, and neither driver was giving an inch. Every single corner, every single lap, they were taking it to the other man, and that is proper touring car racing. For me, that was one of the most entertaining battles of the season.
Yeah, they didn't mess around, did they? And I think that, you look at the pace of Rowbottom's car in qualifying, it was immense, and it should have been a Dynamics 1-2. It should have been shedding on pole. He went purple, green, green, purple, overall best purple, and personal best green. He was probably going to be on pole by 2/10, and he fired it off at church apparently, and got a brake fire because of the grass. So shows you how well that car was working. And then they went absolutely in reverse, like in the races, and they were miles off. And then that brought Rowbottom into Butcher, and then that was a proper battle. And Butcher, I said it in commentary, and I've had Christian Dick message me, just saying thanks for what you said, mate. We agreed with everything, not just about what I was saying about Butcher and Speedworks, his Toyota, but they were just agreeing with me that maybe Butcher, sometimes I wince when I see Butcher battling, because we've said it before, he has a tendency of just getting into the wrong places at the wrong time, and it ends up going across the front of someone's bumper. And that could have happened again at Thruxton for Butcher, but it didn't. But that was a proper battle. And I did see that Tom Ingram was waxing lyrical about Rowbottom in Motorsport News this week, saying he's one of the only guys on the grid at the minute that he would go side by side with into church when a viewer asked that question, because he said if Dan Camish was still around, it'd be him, but Rowbottom is as good as anyone. So yeah, you're dead right, mate. We've waxed lyrical and said how good Rowbottom is. On his day, he's one of the best. He's just not getting the crack of the whip at the minute.
Perhaps that's something he can focus on for 2022. One of the big moments you talked about side by side at church, one of the moments of the race, again, we keep coming back to Ash Sutton, but his move on Tom Oliphant mid-race, that takes huge commitment. And that's the level that Sutton is at. He is leading the championship. That, in years gone past, I've seen drivers like Menu, like Radicic, like Rydell in the Super Touring era, and even people like Neil and Plato and Thompson in the 2000s and whatever. They've been in a situation in the championship where they've got an advantage, and they can either play it safe and keep that advantage, or take a big risk and there's a chance you'll throw it away. Sutton is doing the big risks, but he doesn't even look like he's going to throw it away at this point. That was such a huge commitment moment. And you look at that from the grand context thinking, he doesn't need to be getting in there with Tom Oliver. He doesn't need to be throwing it up the inside of church in race one when it could all go horribly wrong and the car could be in bits in the ditch. And yet this is the kind of level he's at. This is how motivated and how dedicated and upbeat he is to keep pushing it race in, race out. It's phenomenal.
I don't think that was actually an educated guess, because it was the one where he's in between Hill and Oliphant and they were three wide.
That
in
one
Church.
came in race 2, I think, when he was in between Hill and Butcher.
But it just shows you, because I did see some moves all weekend. Like he went around the outside of Hill at Church. He was going around the outside of a lot of people at a lot of corners where I'd be too scared. But that's not an educated guess. That is absolute stoneball confidence in a car that you're driving, because you look at that car and we've said it time and time again, just shouldn't work. But the grip it's got, it's like a monster truck. My mate, who doesn't know much about racing but watches touring cars, he's never raced a car in his life. One of my best mates from school, he always rings me up, I have a debrief. He said that car of Sutton's looks like when you put slicks on a road car, and that's exactly what it just should not work. And Ash always says to me, mate, it's a science. Don't be fooled by us just firing soft springs on. He said, that's not what we're doing. He said, we are working with everything. And that would make absolute sense to me. Absolute sense.
I mean, the car looks from time to time when he's on it and he is teetering on the edge. You saw it several times through the races at Thruxton. That car is dancing with the edge. They used to talk about this in Formula One a lot with Senna. The back end was coming around and yet he could somehow find that blip of the throttle, that tiny little deceleration and lack of wheel spin that could just catch the car back. Sutton's doing that in a touring car. Now, that is not something that you should be able to do with a tin top. Once that thing starts to skew away, it's a washout 100 times over. And yet Sutton just seems to have this blend on the throttle. When he's starting to lose the back end, he has the tenacity to feel where the car is going and catch it mid-slide. And I saw him do this at least 6-7 times during the Thruxton weekend. The guy is absolutely in a different zone at the moment.
And I think that's why we've seen such a big difference in him, Moffat, and Boardley, his two teammates. Who Moffat, I really rate Moffat, you know, and he's done well. Moffat has, but Boardley, you know, he's still learning his trade, learning the car. But Moffat and Sutton was so far away from each other, and I think you're dead right. I think that is because when the car moves, Sutton just has a throttle regulation that no one else seems to have in a rear-wheel drive car. And that forward momentum while the car is four-wheel drifting is it's unstoppable. He did his fastest lap in lap 12 in race 1. Lap 12. The tyres are shot by lap 3. I know that for a fact. And that's the difference at the minute. They have come up with something very clever with what they're doing. And no one, even the might of WSR and BMW, can understand what they're doing. You know, it's the same platform, different engines, as in same platform, it's rear-wheel drive. The front-wheel drive cars have not a hope in hell. I mean, look what he did to Josh Cook, and it's just not it's not a rear-wheel drive circuit. We started the weekend saying it was an FK8 Honda circuit. We had to stop that after race 1 and say it's an FK8 BTC racing circuit. So it's just incredible what Sutton does, and time and time again he seems to do it. And the lads and the girls who race against him have just got massive respect. So he doesn't have a problem getting smashed into because they've got so much respect for him, and that's a big thing to have.
Well, it's whether anyone can catch him to smash into him at the moment. That's the difficulty, isn't it? They're really struggling even to keep up. Let's talk race 2, because this is where Sutton really started to showcase his phenomenal pace. I mean, Hill and Butcher, either side of him, on the approach to Church. And what does Sutton do? He just launches mid-straight, to try and line up the apex. And again, just such conviction, such confidence. There may have been a weight difference, and probably, you know, that's a factor in it. But still, you have to know going in that that's worth trying. And the risk factor is always going to be there. Sutton just doesn't seem to have an issue with it. He just goes straight in, knows that the car can do it, knows that he can do it. And again, right there, Sutton is just pulling off moves that I wouldn't see people like Colin Turkington trying.
I think that is the nail that's been hit on the head. The only people we can go off is BMW. If BMW weren't in it, I would say there'd be more people really moaning about that car because they'd be like, listen, this rear-wheel drive thing's not working. This is a joke. So BMW is Sutton's saviour because that's all you can go off. And what he did in that particular move was just a joke, if I'm being perfectly honest. And that you could see the stress on the left rear tyre as he absolutely wound open the throttle a car and a half length earlier than Jake Hill and got the move done pretty nicely. He needed to get that move done, but he actually didn't. Because I thought we were going to see him break and come out of it and let them battle and then get an overlap on them and try the chicane. That was risky what he did, but it was a calculated risk from a man who knows what he has underneath him, a man that knows a lot about his own car. And the problem for everyone else is that he's now got nearly 2 years knowledge of this car, and it's him. It's him. And it reminds me a lot of the Subaru, but with power. It just reminds me of that. That's all it reminds me of. So he's doing a sterling job of making sure he's on top of his game every weekend. I've never seen anything like it in British touring cars. It's unbelievable.
I mean, we look at it from the comparison of Colin Turkington. He is solid and consistent, and he is not slow. He was not slow throughout Thruxton. He had good pace. The car was strong. He had the ability to move forward, but for whatever reason, he just wasn't able to take the same sort of chances. I mean, he fought his way up to P6 in race 2. Had a difficult first race, admittedly, Colin, but he was able to fight to 6th place in race 2 with some good, solid overtakes. But he's desperately struggling not to be overshadowed at the moment. You know, he's having to do these consistent fights to come back into position. But Sutton's already gone. This is the difficulty. He can't even get close to him in terms of point scores at the moment because Sutton's already taken that advantage and already disappeared. So you find that Turkington is clearly looking frustrated. And I was watching his body language on camera over the weekend. This is a man who knows he should be higher on point scores than this. He's doing all the right things. But circumstance is preventing his car from finishing where it should be finishing. He's doing all the right things. The car's doing all the right things. But because Sutton's already gone, the momentum's already shifted with him. It's like they're chasing their tail and they can't find an answer.
I think that's exactly what it is. If you've got WSR and BMW and Dick Bennett's and all their engineering team scratching their heads about what someone is doing in a team, let's be honest, that is pretty small, but seems to be full of stupendously clever people and the best driver. That's the difference, is that they have the best car, the best driver, and at the minute, that car doesn't seem to be breaking down. So they've put everything in place. And when you look at Tom Ingram, they've put everything. Accelerate were just a steady little team last year, let's be honest. Now you put one of the best engineers in the business, front-wheel drive, Spenny. You've got Tom Ingram, one of the best front-wheel drive drivers and touring car drivers. And now you've got Marvin Humphreys and Sandra Humphreys making sure the logistics is all working as team management. And what have you got? You've got a title contender when you didn't have that last year. It just shows you that it's actually not magic. It's just logical. But I do struggle to find it logical with what Sutton and the team themselves are doing with that car. It's unreal. And Colin, you've got to say that car, that the hindrance for them is that the BMW, well, you remember when the BMW first turned up at Thruxton, it absolutely wiped the floor with everyone. And then they pegged it back just before they went to the second visit of Thruxton. And they were in mid-pack. They were like 6, 7, 8, with maybe Tom Oliphant battling for 4th and 3rd. So, it just shows you that they've actually dropped off the pace, and they've got the likes of Sicily battling with them as well. So Colin must be going home thinking, all I can do is score as many points as I can. I like you literally said, he cannot make an impression on the field as Sutton just disappears into the distance. I haven't seen Turkington really battle with Sutton yet. It's just been Sutton passing and going, or Sutton just gone anyway. It's just like we said at the end of the last show. I said I will bet my house on it that Ash Sutton wins. If Ash Sutton doesn't win this championship, we have got to call it if he finishes all the races and he doesn't get took out and he doesn't win it, we've got to call there's something wrong, because he has to win this because of how we've seen the car just if he gets pegged back, then that's fine. And we know then. But if it doesn't get pegged back and we're not told anything, we've got to call the championship into question. That's a big statement as well.
Now, let's talk a little bit about Tom Ingram. I went back to the archives the other day. Thank you, Duke Video, by the way. Went and spent a little bit of money and got some British touring car reviews so I could sit down and really soak myself in the championship again. I hadn't really done it properly since the early 2000s, really. So I went back and watched all of the 2010s and watched all the 2000s. Took a while. I went back to the 90s. My favourite season British touring car history, no question, 1998. Was loving that battle with Rydell and Reed. And for me, Rydell, Swedish Shuffle, he was always so good at it. And I love going back and watching him pull off those moves, particularly at Thruxton. Then I switch on Thruxton this weekend, and Ingram's ruddy doing it. Ingram's figured out he can do this in a Hyundai. And it was just absolutely on point. And it was really nice to see Ingram going properly old school and outfoxing a driver in a move that you don't really kind of get to see anymore. And he was there, pulling it off as if he was doing it every day. Really nice to see.
I think that was on Butcher. It
was on Butcher, yeah.
Because I remember I was in commentary and I said that is an old school Swedish Shuffle.
It totally
that
is.
Rickard Rydell had pull on someone. And what made it easier for Tom was that Butcher stopped it on the apex and didn't release. He thought he's not going to try go around the outside. I will slow it down. So he wanted a headbutt. I think that's what Butcher wanted, but Ingram was wise to it and just because he's got so much grip in that car, flicked it the other way and fired it into him. So it was classic. But that's only because Spenny and Tom Ingram set the last car up of his, which was the Toyota, and this Hyundai. They set it up so on the nose that he can do that and knows how much. He seems to be able to have more lock on than anyone else, more power, and the car's dragged into the corner. So it's clever stuff, and that's why you're seeing Plato and people struggling. The old hands, like if you brought Matt Jackson back into this championship and give him 6 months testing before he went out, he'd be nowhere near these new guys. I honestly think that they're that good. Cookie, Ingram, all these guys, they are special. Colin Turkington, all right, he might be in a car that maybe not, is losing a bit of touch on the other cars, which shouldn't be the case, if I'm honest. But it just shows you how good these other kids are. They are unbelievable. And they always say, if Jensen Button and people like that say it, they knew when to leave because the new kids were quick. And they always said that. But you were the new kid one day, and, Matt Neal come up to me once when in my first year, and he went, mate, fair play what you've done there. And I'm thinking, whatever, mate. I was going to do that anyway. I'm younger than you. But then when I started getting older, I was like, oh, God, these new kids are a bit fast.
Yeah.
So it's just like the body shells of the cars. They get old and they just can't do it anymore.
Is that what we're in now? Is that what we're looking at with this group of drivers? Because obviously we've had this period of transition. The last few years, it's been about Shedden, Turkington. You could say, obviously, Matt Neal and Jason Plato have still been a factor in it from time to time as well. And you've had people like Collard who are now, they've disappeared from the scene. Matt Jackson disappeared from the scene. And now we've got this collection of Cook, Hill, Sutton, Ingram. Is that, and then you've got other drivers in there as well. You've got the Butchers, the Oliphants, the Moffats, the Morgans. Is that now, are these going to be like the next legends of British touring cars? Is that where we're looking at now for the next like 10, 15 years? These are the guys that will be there year in, year out, taking the victories for, the next 15 years.
Yeah, no doubt. Sutton, for me, he should go and do Le Mans prototypes or sports cars. He's better. This is disrespectful.
I do agree with you on that, actually. I do think he's at that level of world-class driver.
He's a Porsche. He's a Porsche factory driver. He's a Ferrari factory driver. We are lucky that we've got him. He is he's a Laurent Aiello of his time in my book.
Yeah.
Like, he's that good, mate. He's like, I don't know why he's bothering playing with us peasants. That's what I'm saying. That guy is as good as any. He could make a killing. He's one of the best drivers in the world. Full stop. And like you said, Hill, not spoken about enough. Under the radar, not in your face, not won any races, just finishes. Probably one of the top 3 drivers in the championship. They're that good. These kids are that good. They're businessmen. They're engineers. Cook and Sutton. Cook and Sutton, I'm looking here. Cook and Sutton could get out of them cars and engineer any of those other drivers up the grid. That's how clever they are. They are properly switched on. Especially Josh Cook. People don't understand. That kid could go and engineer an F1 car. I'm telling you now. I was at Alton Park the other day doing some coaching. I asked him to jump in a car for me because I felt like it had a bit of a problem across the front axles. He'd come in, do this, do that, stick 2 clicks of that on and just soften the rear roll bar. And I was like, I could feel it, mate, but I didn't think it'd be that. 6/10 I found.
And he was right.
Right, yeah. That kid, honestly, those boys, Andy Rouse was the last person I can remember that was that clever as Sutton and Cook. I'm telling you now.
Wow.
And it's great to see. That's what I love. I love all that side of it. It's not just about Ingram again. Oh, these guys they know exactly what's going on. From what I've heard in that camp, he's as switched on as Spenny, mate. He's as switched on as Spenny. Because I've heard other people say he directs him. It's not the other way around, which I would believe. I think sometimes you can have an engineer that works with you on a car to just bounce an idea off, and then you go with that because you're driving it, and it's like, it's the way to go, isn't it? And it's like, yeah, I think it is. Yeah, you're right. So them two, that's why they work so well together. Very, very switched on people.
That's
Great
majestic praise. I have to say, that's majestic praise, but very well deserved. Race 3, we had some stereotypical race 3 shenanigans. It always tends to happen towards the end of the day. Jade Edwards, what is her affinity with Allards? I don't know what it is, but for some reason, she's just had a monster shunt in the first weekend of the season, and now another one in the second visit. I mean, you've got to feel for Jade. And these things, people don't realize just how big an impact accidents like that have on a season, not just necessarily from a psychological point of view, but from a fiscal point of view. That's going to be such a hammer blow to the BTC racing budget. Doesn't matter what Josh Cook is doing in the races at the front. You have a big accident like that, that's definitely going to throw a massive curveball into Jade Edwards and the team's season. They want to keep her going as much as they see with Senna and obviously you see with Josh, but that's a difficult one for the team to take.
Yeah, I know Jade very well, and I honestly still can't believe that she's still racing, because I know for a fact that is not the biggest budget in the world. So I just only hope to goodness that she is able to get to the end of the year. I mean, she's never, ever, ever said anything to me, but I'm just making assumptions on things I know from an outsider. So I just don't know how she does it. And she was so unlucky. I only seen it once properly, what happened with Shedden and Jaden. It doesn't matter whose fault it was. It looked like a racing-ish incident to me. She didn't really move, and Shedden looked like he either didn't turn in or had oversteer as the car moved on a bump or something. But anyway, it caused a shunt. He had a massive, massive accident as well, didn't he? So, yeah, it wasn't good in all respects, that. But, I mean, that girl, I think she had a really good qualifying from what I remember. I think she was 19th or something.
Yeah,
she did
very well.
Yeah, very well. And I just hope she gets a break, mate. I really do. I'm just sick of her Facebook post saying, typical Saturday, we go again, we do this. I'm just waiting for her to she deserves it so much. And I just hope she doesn't lose her drive for what she's doing. As in not drive literally, I just mean the drive that keeps you going, because I know when it goes, and I've had it go twice, and I was all for not going to the next race, and I nearly got James Thompson in actually to drive my car, because I just couldn't be bothered. I'm glad I didn't, because I actually had some good races at the end of the year. But I know how it is as a driver, because Jake, you know yourself, being in this industry, mate, we don't just sit around waiting for Friday afternoon to go and shake the car down, and then it's all week, mate. It's all week, and you live it, you breathe it. And Tim Harvey always says it on commentary: you live it, you breathe it, and you do your very, very best. And it becomes too much sometimes. And I've had my own sister say, you need to just stop being OE29, which is my handle for, Instagram and Twitter and stuff. That's what you need to stop doing. When someone says that to you, it's quite shocking, because that's all you rely on to go racing. So when you have to come away from that and have time out yourself, which I know Jade will, I'm with her tomorrow for McLaren. So yeah, it is. I just hope I hope the best for her, mate, because you know her yourself, mate. She's a proper woman, mate, and a trailblazer. I just hope we don't lose her.
Well, she's a great racer. She has that sort of attitude, that tenacity. And she, for me, has always invoked the spirit of why we go racing in the first place. We do it because we love it. We have difficulties and things that we have to go through. We've got to work at it. We've got to graft. You are prepared to do whatever it takes to go racing. And if you don't give up on that, you will eventually be rewarded. So it was really nice for me to see her as a racing driver get the opportunity to get a full-time seat. And it's not just because she's a woman in the sport and it's good for the gender equality. Of all of the racing drivers out there on the grid, you're going to be hard pushed to find any racing driver in that British touring car field that works harder than she has had to work over the last 5-6 seasons in terms of budget, in terms of motivation, in terms of team morale, in terms of her own personal morale. And, it's great to see people like that getting rewarded with the chance. So as you say, I completely agree. Hopefully this isn't a stumbling block. It's only a motivational opportunity for her. I really want to see her continue. And I would like it, 10 years from now, we're talking about these characters that have been in the Touring Car Championship for a long time. I would like her to be a permanent staple of it. I think she's earned it.
Oh, definitely, no doubt. And you know what? Matt Neal always said to me years ago when I was down in the dumps, and Matt was always very good to me. He used to say to me, mate, to enjoy the good times, you have to have rode the rough seas. And, we've all been there in anything we do in our careers, TV, commentating, racing cars. We've all been there. And you come out the other side and you're like, you're dead right, because you can't have it all good all the time. I just hope she gets the chance that she deserves, because I spoke to her at length at the beginning of this year and said, just enjoy this moment, because you never know if it'll ever carry on. If you enjoy it, you'll always perform better. But I just think now she's starting to she's never said anything to me. I think she's just starting to get fed up now with what's happening. So I just don't like you say, she hasn't got here by chance, by the way, is she? She not pulled this out. This ain't a lottery. This is years and years and years of a normal person from a working class family knowing what she wants to do and getting it took years. So she ain't going to give up on it like that. So we'll be fine, mate, with it.
I really hope that 10 years from now, we're still talking about her as a staple of the British touring car paddock. Ingram, race 3, so strong. Just when you felt that the weekend was not really quite clicking and coming together for Ingram, and he was doing the best he could with it, but the points weren't really coming. Boom, his move on Sutton in the final chicane. I mean, seriously, that man, just when you think you know him and you know what he can do, he pulls something like that out of the bag. And for me, his move at Knock Hill was exceptional, really an exceptional move. But for me, the way he battled past Sutton, yes, Sutton had a heavier car, but you've still got to get that move done. You've still got to psych out your opponent, and you've got to squeeze him to give him a choice. You're either going to hit me and we're going to have an accident, or you're going to concede the place. And Ingram put Sutton in a position that Sutton is used to putting other drivers in. So for me, that move from Ingram on Sutton, without a question, I think that's definitely the best pass he has made this year. And it's certainly the most important overtake he's made recently.
And it is, because not just for points, but psychologically, I think it just shows Sutton that he's still there. And I think as well that listen, we've talked about Sutton a lot, but we would be talking about a 7th place finish for Tom Ingram in race 2 if he didn't have the puncture. Then you would have been talking about a race win in race 3 from a reverse grid. That's the difference. So it just shows you how important every race is, but race 2 is massively important. And he just hung on to that car with it having a left front puncher in race 2, and that then gave him the chance to have, hardly no weight at all in the car and be able to push on forward. So it was just that, because Sutton hasn't got, I don't think, Sutton doesn't fear anyone, but it was like you just rightly said, it was a bit like, oh, he's still there, he's still here with us. still here. And that is the only thing that Tom Ingram could do, because he weren't getting on the podium in that race 3. So he needed to make that pass to go, mate, I'm still here, mate, and I'm still in the fight. So you just keep watching in your mirrors, lad. So yeah, it's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah. Also in race 3, Smelt and Boardley having their moment on the run up to turn 2. That got a little bit interesting. I don't know whether we call that usual race 3 jitters or whether that was something a little bit too clumsy from them. I think it's fair to say that it's just one of those things. In race 3, as a driver, you always push that a little bit harder because you know you're not going to give the mechanics a sweat in the middle of the afternoon. Race 1, you've got to look after the car. Race 2, you've got to place it in a good position. Race 3, you go in and go hard, don't you? You just give it that little bit more momentum and you can take the risks perhaps a little bit more in race 3 than you would have done at the start of the day.
Yeah, definitely. I only seen it once, to be honest, and I'll be honest, that's a factory car and it should be further up. Toyota wanted 2 cars up the front, and Sam, as much as he's a nice kid, you're never going to win a title for one of your drivers if the other one is that far back. So Ingram was always on his own, and Butcher is on his own. So you can count Butcher out the title fight, in my opinion. I think that you at least, let's be honest. Let's talk about teammates. Ingram's got a great chance to still win the title if Chris Smiley, which he is doing, steps up to the plate, because he has his weekends where he's right at the front.
He does.
And it could end up being 12 points in it. They're going into the final round at Brands Hatch GP. Chris Smiley's on the front row with Ash Sutton. If you were Ash Sutton, you'd have a proper squeaky bottom, because you're not too sure either about Chris Smiley, because if there's anyone that races hard, it's Chris Smiley. That wasn't disrespectful and driving into people. I mean, if Chris is on your side, you want to go and have a fight with someone, because you know that he's not going to give up. So the teammate thing, yeah, I just think it's right to say that. It's difficult, this championship, but it's professional. And if you're going to have championship colours or factory colours on your car, you've got to be somewhere near the front, in my eyes, unless both cars or 3 cars or whatever you're running it are awful. So, you see Jelly, Oliphant, Turkington fighting for podiums, factory car. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's the thing for me. I think these factory drivers need to be factory drivers and driving like a factory driver. So yeah, that becomes a problem then. So
I mean, because what you're saying essentially is that the second driver is obviously in a factory team, and what the manufacturer is going to do. I mean, if you're looking at people like BMW and Toyota, they're there obviously as a factory entrant, and they're thinking, well, we need to maximize our chances. They've gone with Sam Smelt because he's young, he's talented, he's got good potential. But if you're looking at drivers like Josh Cook, Jake Hill, these guys are banging in fantastic results. The manufacturer is not going to be dumb. They're going to look at that and go, well, they're delivering week in, week out with a percentage of our budget. So we need the firepower, and then we can win every weekend. So the pressure's always going to be on a young driver like that.
It is, yeah. And it wasn't really a dig at Sam in particular. It's just, if you're gonna be a factory team, you need to be up the front, don't you? And listen, we've all been there, and Sam will bring corporate sponsors with him, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I just think you've got to be, I've been in a factory team, and don't get me wrong, I brought corporate sponsors, but at the same time, I was winning races and was on the podium. So
you had to work for it. You couldn't just be handed it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm not saying that Sam is, but I just think that he shouldn't be battling with Boardley and having an accident with him, whose ever fault it was. It's like, you need to be up the front. You've got to, this is getting to the point. This championship now is the most competitive tin top championship on planet Earth. DTM's gone. DTM's like GT3. It's not a touring car.
Even supercars in Australia, it's kind of 3 or 4 drivers each year that get the look in. That's it.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we're now looking at everyone. Like, everyone's got a chance, haven't they? Like the top 6 have got a chance, and they are. I mean, even the top 10 drivers. I don't even know how many. Have we got 9 different winners or 8 different winners?
Yeah.
You can win a touring car race. You're pretty good. At the end of the day, if you get on the touring car podium, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think it's difficult as well for Sam to have Rory Butcher as a teammate, but whoever was going to be in that lead car was going to be fast anyway, because that's what Toyota needed and wanted.
Well, speaking of multiple winners, it was a good opportunity for Adam Morgan, but again, we got a semblance in race 3 of just how competitive it is out there, because Adam Morgan is not a rubbish driver by any stretch of the imagination. We've been talking about him for 10 years now as a potential British touring car champion. He has always been able to maximize the most out of his car. And he was really fighting with the BMW, not just any car, with the BMW. He was fighting to keep that win, having a couple of moments here and there because the pressure was absolutely monstrous. And fair credit to Adam Morgan. When you've got that quantity and quality of drivers on him, he had Turkington, Proctor, Hill, Cook, Butcher, all these incredible drivers, Ingram, they're all on him all the way through that race. And you know that you've got the cream of the crop hovering on your gearbox all the way through the race on the back bumper of the car. It's so easy to get it wrong and so easy to make a mistake. And he did. But he was so controlled and disciplined with himself that he was able to bring it back so that he didn't mess it up and throw it away. That takes a very strong character.
Yeah. Oh, every day of the week. And I've got to say, I'm just looking at lap times, and, that's the first time, I said it in commentary, it's the first time I've seen the BMW customer team be as fast on paper, full stop, with not massive weight delta between them, to be, right on the button. And I thought, Adam Morgan, it would have been so disappointing for him to lose that race on the mistake he made. But like I said again, if I was Colin Turkington, I would have been up there with a book and going, you can't gain an advantage and then drop back after 2 laps just so it looks like you've done it. I would be fuming at that, because it's took away the lap and a half's chance of trying to get past you, because he was putting him under big pressure. But Adam was astounding, and I'm actually glad he kept the win. But at the same time, if I was Adam, I'd have been like, hang on a minute, what do you want me to do? Just crash into the middle of the chicane and fire everything everywhere. I was out of control. So they both, I don't know how hard BMW and WSR push that, because they are factory ex-factory cars. So yeah, but Adam Morgan, mate, I've seen Chilton be made look ordinary by Josh Cook in BTC Honda last year. It's another level now. Adam Morgan is. Matt Neal said this to me at the beginning of the year. He said he's the most underrated driver he can ever remember. And I've got to say, I think he's dead right, because driving a rear-wheel drive touring car is not all it is fathomed out to be. It's proper technical. I reckon there's another 15% engineering input into a rear-wheel drive car than there is in a front-wheel drive car. That you've just got trailing wheels in a front-wheel drive car, and it sounds a bit blasé, but yeah, I think to get a rear-wheel drive car to work as a driver and engineer is a lot more to it than what you see from the front-wheel drive guys. So yeah, Adam Morgan, astounding. Sicily, brilliant, exceptional weekend that was. He is right up there in the points.
He really is. I was going to make this point. I mean, we talk about the top 5: Sutton, Ingram, Cook, Hill, Turkington. All 5 of those drivers for me still have a mathematical and realistic chance to have a title assault. The next man is Adam Morgan. He's done it solidly. He's done it consistently, but he's there on 144, and he's taken 2 wins over the course of the season. Nobody else behind him has got a double win under their belt. They've all had 1 each. Butcher's had a win, Red Bottom's had a win, Proctor's had a win, Oliphant's had a win. So, he is not far away. Had he not had that little blip in the second half of the meeting at Thruxton, he'd be right there. He'd be right there in this title fight.
Yeah, it is. I mean, what is he behind? He's actually not that far at all, is he?
He's only 25 off Turkington.
25 off Turkington. That's like a race win and a bit more.
It is, yeah. So he's still technically a factor.
So the only other person I can remember being that close to Colin Turkington in a BMW, in any BMW, is Andrew Jordan. And that took him years.
It did, yeah.
Close to him.
I can't believe, that's a very good point. Yeah. I can't believe
So
we're still talking about these things week in, week out, and we're still getting baffled by the things we're uncovering. It's wonderful. So yeah, Adam Morgan, star power, star third victory, and that keeps him in the fight. I want to make a point towards Tom Oliphant. Showcased his quality again in the beginning of the weekend. That just kind of shows you how unlucky a season he has had. Those last couple of weekends where everything's fallen apart for Tom. You've got to look at Alton Park, nightmare weekend. Knock Hill, nightmare weekend. Without those two, he'd be there as well. He would be there with Morgan, with his teammate Turkington, with Butcher. He would be in that sort of plane. So it's, again, you know, we come back to this every time, the competitive nature. You can't afford a single DNF. You can't afford a single bad race because so many other people are going to take advantage. You remember a couple of episodes ago, we were talking about Gordon Shedden being third in the points. And this is him. He's back, his rejuvenation. But no, you know, he's had a horrible weekend at Thruxton and he's suddenly plummeted to 9th in the points. You cannot afford a single bad race.
No. Do you know what it reminds me of? And you remember 24-hour races years ago, and you'll know loads about this, or GT races. You would go at 8/10. I was in British GT going at 7 to 8/10, and they were only half an hour each of a driver. It was always 7 to 8/10. 24-hour races now are very much like BTCC seasons. They're a sprint race for every single driver that gets in the car. It's qualifying laps for 24 hours because the cars are so consistent and they don't break down.
Yeah, they're very durable now.
They're durable. And that is exactly what the drivers and the teams are like now. They're just day in, day out, hour after hour, race after race, just going as fast as they can. No one's looking after anything. They're just going flat out. I think a lot of it as well is because the tyre is so good now from Goodyear. And I think especially around Thruxton, we had one failure in the race. That was Ingram. And I think that was to do with, that sounded like either a curb strike or a track surface problem on the exit of Church. So it just shows you that if you can keep your car running, then you are going to be able to just go at 10/10. And I just find it amazing. And that's why you're seeing a disparity between the good drivers and the not so good ones. It's phenomenal. Oliphant, though, I've got to say, he was exceptional this weekend. I mean, we talk about Morgan, but Oliphant, what he did, 2/3, then race 1 and race 2, just got overlooked, mate. It just got overlooked. And Hill as well. And top 4 in every race, I think he had overlooked because of what else was happening. Proper effort from Oliphant. That really, really interestingly good.
No, he did a great job. I mean, I was going to kind of wind up on Thruxton by making a point of who would be my driver of the weekend. We've said it a couple of times this year already, but when you look at everything in context, for me, the driver of the weekend at Thruxton is a name who, again, has gone under the radar, and that's Jake Hill. I mean, look at what he did. A 2nd and 2/4. He was the only driver all weekend to keep his car in the top 5 for all 3 races. For all 3 races. When you've got ballast to take into account as well in race 2, he still kept the car in P4. And then in reverse grid trim, he was still able to get the car back into the top 5. I mean, again, we've said it before. It is crazy that he hasn't won a race this year because in terms of what he's able to bring out of that Ford and what he and Motorbase have done from the start of the year, where essentially you look at it and they've kind of had to stitch the team back together element by element. It's kind of been completely reformed and, you know, reconnected. And they've had to do this as the race season progresses. So what Jake is actually dragging out of the car, it reminds me very much of what Damon Hill dragged out of the Arrows in Formula One in 97. You know, that car was 5.5 seconds off the pace. By the end of the year, he was less than a 10th off the Ferrari and the Williams. You know, it's that kind of consistency. You know, Damon Hill very much like Jake Hill then. So, you know, he's been able to create such an incredible package through the course of the season. And can you think of another driver, even Ash Sutton, who could have brought their car to the top 5 in all 3 races? You wouldn't even think Jake would be capable of it. So the fact that he's done it, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I cannot get my breath how good he's been this year. Like, so good. I mean, he's 9 points off second place in the championship.
And he's 2 ahead of Turkington.
Yeah, I mean, 2 ahead of Turkington. I mean, the people that are behind him is just unbelievable. I mean, Cook had a stellar weekend, didn't he, because of the win in the second place he had. But, you know, that Jake Hill, just to have those, he hasn't even won a race yet. It's just been podium and big scoring points. And I think if your face isn't in the top 3, but even then, Oliphant's face was in the top 3. There's a lot going on in the championship at the minute with people who are the king of Thruxton. And as we go to Croft, it'll be the king of Croft, talking about Turkington and Sutton. The media, it goes into overdrive when these things are happening. And we do forget about Jake because he's not Plato. He's not yap. He's just getting on with his job. And I think that's what's going to give him a massive chance of winning, because he doesn't need to chat to get more media coverage. He's just trying to. He's a typical pro, like an old pro, just gets on with the job and tries to get maximum points. I mean, that the point scoring he's done from the back end of last year in that FK2 Honda to now, he learned a lot in that FK2 Honda when he was struggling and trying to score points but had engine failures, and then he just got his head down. I think he was the biggest point scorer from halfway house last year to the end of the year, biggest point scorer out of anybody. So that just shows you how clever and consistent he's now become.
It's a fascinating battle, and now that we've got these top 5 locked together, there are so many good elements we can talk about them. Sutton now has a 30-point lead over Ingram. There are 4 weekends to go. The only way I can feasibly see him losing the title, I'm with you on this one, is that if something goes horribly wrong, if he has a bad weekend, then it suddenly opens up. But even then, I still think the team and Ash will have, the firepower and the consistency and the solidarity to fight back from it. Ingram, the only driver this year in the top 5 that has yet to retire from a race. They have kept that car going every single opportunity they've got. And Ingram is so strong with it. Cook, very fast when he needs to be, disciplined when he's not on the top step of the podium. Jake, so quiet, cool, calm and collected, banging in those points finishes. Turkington, relying on the technical acumen and the real graft of that BMW. He's still very much a factor. So you've got a real nice, juicy cast of drivers to come into these last 4 weekends. And look at the circuits we've got coming. Croft, Silverstone, Donington, and the Brands Hatch GP. These are the circuits that really test a driver's mentality. So this is going to be a fascinating tail end of the season.
Yeah, definitely. And, like we said about Colin having to go to Knockhill and win or forget about it, I think, again, he's been backed into a corner that the King Croft needs to go to Croft. And with his 5th place ballast, which will be pretty light, he needs at least 1 win and a podium to be in with a shout, because Sutton, I think the championship will be completely over by the end of qualifying if Sutton's in the top 3, which it could be round there. I think it'd be game
a statement.
over.
That's a statement.
I honestly think we may as well all go home. I just think that it's, I think that car is 10% better than anything out there. Ash is 10% better than anybody out there. And I think that is your 20% that you will find at the end of the year in points. I honestly think that.
So it's the weekend where Turkington has to make or break it. We will be watching and we will be very close to the action. Great job in the comms box, by the way. I mean, you're becoming a bit of a Matt Neal now, Paul. Excellent. Good job there in the commentary box. Keep that going.
Tall and boring.
Oh, do we let that get back to Matt? Oh dear. Right, we'll crack on. Great to see you, Paul, and yes, we will have another episode of The Undercut after Croft. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you look forward to it. It's going to be a cracker.